must stop the terror. Now watch this drive.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Wakanda forever.
Minnesota!
Please clap.
I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully.
Rick, I'll tell you what. 10,000 bucks? $10,000 bet?
I'm not in the betting business,
but okay.
Spencer Cox is a former telecom executive who always seems like he's auditioning for the title of America's guiltiest white guy.
I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. Go Jazz.
Rip City, go Blazers.
Disagreeing better, not disagreeing less, is the answer.
All right, welcome everyone to the Pattern Recognition Podcast. I'm here with Colton Hatch. Colton ran for Utah's 2nd Congressional District in the 2026 cycle. He ran in the Republican primary and wanted to give him an opportunity to share why he ran for Congress, a little bit about what his thoughts on what's going on in the state and what's going on in our country. So Colton, good to have you. And let's just start with who is Colton Hatch?
Yeah, who's Colton Hatch? I mean, I'm a guy born in Canada, so in a small farm town, and I grew up knowing what hard work is. I helped with branding season, framing homes with my father, running an umpire program for Little League, and lots of other jobs. My father boxed for Team Canada, and I was brought up with the knowledge of the importance of athletics as a foundation of life. I was raised LDS, and I'm a proud scouter, and I was blessed to have my father as a scout leader all growing up. The wild scouting adventures we had are cherished memories of mine. I became interested in politics from a very young age, seeing how my family was impacted by the nature of how local government contracts are given out. A consistent sore point with my father, I was told about the government's ability to decide who could be successful. During school, I had some issues with people bullying me and had to deal with the school's complete lack of ability or desire to solve the problem. I learned that the only way to protect yourself from violence is with overwhelming violence of your own. To the surprise of no one listening, once that capacity was demonstrated, the bullying evaporated. Family history is a big part of my family, and we're very proud of our family's efforts to build the Cartston Temple and settle that surrounding land. I have a hope box built from reclaimed wood from when my grandfather worked on the renovations of what had been put in by previous generations. With my family as one of the original settlers of Utah, I knew early on that I wanted to come back to the USA. During Ron Paul's second presidential race is when I became interested in US politics. This was where I would mark the beginning of the now classic libertarian to right-wing pipeline. After graduating high school, I came to BYU, Idaho for a semester and even volunteered door knocking for Republican campaigns. When home for that Christmas, my father passed away. We didn't know it at the time, but from his over 200 bouts of fighting career, he had developed CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It had been progressively getting worse. He died that New Year's Eve, and it changed our family trajectory a lot, to say the least. I gave up higher education for the time being. I moved back home, completed the house we were living in, resolved my father's remaining contracts, and dissolved the family business. Trying to help bring stability to my family situation. Eventually things were well enough I was able to leave for a full-time mission for the church. I was called to the Utah Ogden mission and immediately had people chuckle that, yeah, it's international, but you are ending up in Utah. It never bothered me at all though, as the main example in my life of someone that served happened to have gone to that same mission many years prior. While serving, my mother was remarried to a man who happened to live in the mission who was from Riverdale. While this generated some drama, for the mission, it ended up having some positive effects. I broke my hand, blew out my ACL, and if my family would have been in Canada still, I would have been released and not able to finish my 2 years. As it stood, I was able to live at home in a very restricted manner with a tight timeline on being able to walk several miles unassisted, making rapid progress healing and training with my companions. I was able to get back to the field quickly. Towards the end of my mission, I began to realize that I had no home to go back to. My mother having sold the house we'd been living in and moving my younger siblings down here once my visa was up, I was going to be homeless. With no money left to my name after paying for my mission, I had to figure something out quickly. I was admitted to the LDS BC in downtown Salt Lake, which generated my visa. I was too old to get a green card when my mother and siblings did. In order to qualify for a visa, I had to prepay for 3 semesters of school, and my mother very kindly put up the $4,500 it took. Knowing how much of a sacrifice that was for her, I made sure it was going to stretch as far as it needed to. I was able to get scholarships and work to cover the balance of my associate's degree. While at school and newly released from my mission, I was actively looking to get married, as all RMs do. I was seriously dating another woman at the time, and things just didn't feel right. It wasn't until I was in class and saw a picture of my professor's daughter that I had the impression I was supposed to marry that girl. So I broke it off with my then girlfriend, and after the semester was over and I already got my A, I asked the professor if I could get in contact with her daughter. We didn't need the whole story here, but within a year, we were married. As soon as I got my green card, I walked into the recruiter's office.
All right. Well, thank you. That's quite the story. Sorry to hear about your father. Why did you join the Utah National Guard? When I was going through your congressional website, that was one of the more prominent details that was on your site. Can you explain a little bit why you decided to join, when you joined, the process of joining, kind of what you did with the Guard?
Absolutely. I love the Army, and I don't regret my time there at all. I enlisted for a lot of reasons, some more practical than others. Primarily, I enlisted because I felt that since I wasn't born here, I owed a debt that can only be paid one way: the iron price. My family had fought in many U.S. conflicts in the past, including the Revolutionary War, and it just felt right that I would enlist. Growing up, I was always interested in the military, going to museums, learning history. For a Canadian family, we were about as involved with firearms that you really can be as a normal person. I had both my restricted and non-restricted permits back there. We did woods ball paintballing and watched a lot of war movies, hunting, etc. My dad ensured that I was not unfamiliar with violence and dying. Looking back, some of it feels really cringe, yet all the same, I was dramatically more prepared than the rest of the group I showed up to basic with. I enlisted as a 12 Bravo, which is a combat engineer. It was the most high-speed MOS available to someone who couldn't get a security clearance at swear-in, as I was not a citizen yet. I joined the 118th Sapper Company, and I was very proud that Utah had their own Sapper Company. The most important story of my 6 years came right towards the end. After winning the NCO Best Warrior competition, a lot of opportunities opened up. I was given a slot at OCS, which is Officer Candidacy School, and was preparing for that course when COVID hit. The iteration of the course I was headed to was canceled, which is an incredibly rare thing to happen in the Army. So our whole class and group, we were pushed back a cycle. During that time, the mandate started rolling out. I ended up back at my previous unit, which at this point was the Alpha 145 Field Artillery. All of us engineers got rolled over when the Sapper Company was closed. As one of the last vaccine holdouts, there was a group of us that were brought down to Camp Williams and put through what most people would call a coercive ordeal. Of the 8 of us in the lineup, the first in the line was our lieutenant, who was very pregnant, guessing about 7 to 8 months along. She walked into the room we were waiting for, and a short while later emerged further down the hall from another door and was sobbing, deeply disturbed, and a band-aid on her arm. When it came my turn to go in, I was met with a series of stations, manned by what I can only assume was every doctor and nurse in the brigade. At each station, I had to explain myself, be told why I was wrong, what the medical professionals had to say, the facts, trademarked. At any time, the process could end though. There were people ready to give me the vaccine right there, and everything would just go away. The last station was different. It wasn't medical professionals, it was JAG. 2 Army lawyers sitting in front of a document. This document I was walked through in detail. The crux of it was this: if I signed that I was refusing the vaccine, I was willing to accept a dishonorable discharge from the Army if that's what the Army ends up deciding to do with me. I would no longer have any say in the disciplinary process, and I was to be chaptered out one way or another. Their decision. As far as I'm aware, I am one of 2 people to sign that paper. Thankfully, with the goodwill and reputation I had spent a career making with my local command, they slow-rolled the discharge efforts until I became close enough to my natural contract end and was able to get me a form saying that I had no intention of re-enlisting. So saying no to COVID cost me my entire career in the Army and tore apart family plans, but at least I didn't get a felony over it. and I will forever be grateful to my local command for getting me that out. Despite the numerous ways the Army screwed with my life, I still miss it, and all the people I served with. It's a weird relationship you build with the Army, but I miss it every day.
So you're saying because you wouldn't take the COVID vaccine, the Army forced you out prematurely or earlier than you wanted to leave?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And as the whole process, it just got more and more punishment stacking up until they basically said, "Are you willing to accept the felony in order to keep this out of your body?"
I mean, I knew a lot of people that faced forced quote unquote vaccine through OSHA. If you remember that, when the Biden administration tried pushing OSHA to require private, companies to have the vaccine, with different company sizes or whatever. They're trying to make it workplace safety. Wow, but and obviously I knew that there was stuff like that going on in the Army and municipalities like San Diego, I feel like maybe, or New York for sure, Chicago, where they had like police officers and firefighters that were facing the same situation, like take the vaccine or get out. So did that experience with the Army and them forcing you out, and did that play anything with why you decided to run for Congress, or what did bring you to run for Congress?
That's a great follow-up question. I want vengeance for what we all went through with COVID. Unfortunately, a lot of people, even in the Republican camp, just want it to go away because they partook and they caved. And a lot of people cannot stand to be with people that show that, no, you weren't forced. There was a choice, and you caved when the pressure was on. And that speaks a lot to people's character. And so even people in Republicans, they want it to go away, and I don't want it to go away. But in terms of why did I run for Congress? How was my experience? I mean, there's a lot to it. While I was at the LDS Business College, I had run the Young Americans for Liberty chapter and got involved more and more with politics, with volunteering, speaking, organizing, reading, and debating. I left libertarianism when I read the book by Walter Block called Defending the Undefendable. I don't know if you're familiar with it as an audience, but essentially it's Walter Block going through some of the most extreme examples of libertarianism, in this case, anarcho-capitalism, and making a case for why it's still good. One of those scenarios was Murder Park. Murder Park is saying that if a privately held park, like an amusement park, said, hey, you know what? Everyone's coming here as a consenting adult, and you're going to have a murder game. And it's all fine because it's all voluntary, and he made this whole case for why it was good. Well, another part of libertarianism is that parents are able to make health and life decisions for your children is because you fundamentally own them as your property, because they come from you, and until they become agents unto themselves, they're yours. And I realized that libertarianism ultimately ended up with a different type of amusement park being perfectly allowed as far as Walter Block would be concerned. And I realized that any ideology that just is going to follow a principle until it arrives at the most horrendous things you can imagine can't be true. And so I left libertarianism and became very right-wing. And that was a big part of that. After graduating from the LSBC and eventually attending the University of Utah, I attempted to get involved with the College Republicans and the brand new Turning Point USA. But at that time, those organizations were still too captured, too buck broken to tolerate my presence. So I worked as an avant-garde, interacting with them from the outside, pushing their ideology. I started local chapters of other organizations that brought me into direct confrontation with Antifa and Intel networks. Eventually, I closed my organizations down when managing Fed infiltration efforts became unsustainable. After following a number of these races in our state and seeing the tumult around the redistricting, I had a long talk with my wife about whether I should become a public-facing person again. We determined that it was the best time in the last 10 years and the next 10 years to run against Blake. At the time we made our decision to run, Carrie Ann had not announced anything yet. So we began preparing and budgeting. It was an outside chance to win for sure, but it would be the best lobbying money I could ever spend if nothing else came of it. The day before I planned to register, Carrie Ann announced, and I was very excited. In my opinion, my odds of winning outright had increased significantly. What I didn't appreciate at the time was that my odds of getting onto the primary ticket cratered. After my registration went live, I was immediately invited to a Lincoln dinner for Salt Lake County. Thankful for the opportunity to get FaceTime with people, and particularly party leadership, I paid my fee and brought my wife. This is where I began to learn about party machinations that go on even at the state level. With how strong the outreach was to me to get me to that room, I was surprised to be placed on a table on the absolute extremity of the room, which my wife and I laughed off as an "of course" kind of thing. Then we heard Mike Kennedy and Burgess Owens speak. Seeing the brokered deal that was made forcing Burgess out was eye-opening. Carrie Ann was even given a chance to speak, and I couldn't help but laugh. It was bad. But in that same vein as seeing Burgess being forced out, it was made apparent that the party leadership had decided Carrie Ann was their person, which solidified why there was such an effort to have me there, to send a message. I had entered a race where the federal level had already decided who they wanted, and the state level had also already decided. I began working to contact other organizations for help and financing, building out my calendar of events, working the phones, developing the website, all while working a full-time job and having 4 children, the oldest of which is 7. The goal was to talk to delegates directly, find existing organizations that were not happy with the current state of affairs, and find a way to wedge myself onto the primary ticket. When I had decided to run, I knew that the last time someone ran against Blake, they crushed convention running on an anti-Blake campaign. But that was not a successful strategy at the primary level. I guessed that if I ran, the anti-Blake vote would only be stronger. And by simply not being him, I would have a lot of support. This is obviously Carrie Ann's plan as well. With Blake getting just over 40% last time and not being able to lean on the Salt Lake delegates anymore, I had anticipated him to cap out at 20% of the delegates, his ardent supporters. As the delegates, who are allegedly the most informed, would know how much worse things are than last cycle. With it being a 3-way race, I wanted to focus exclusively on why I would be a good person to send to Congress. I wanted to leave all the mudslinging to Carrie Ann. My plan was not to win convention outright, but to just beat Blake in round 1. Then once Blake wasn't an option, I'll be able to hit the 40% threshold and get on the ballot. Knowing that Carrie Ann would be locked into an anti-Blake strategy, I was hoping that she would be able to spend her campaign funds on telling people why not to vote for Blake, saving me massive funding issues. Then, while her and Blake were getting into it on the stage, I would be able to sidestep the whole issue and speak directly to the constituents about my issues. It was a reasonable strategy, but so many assumptions I had that went into it were just simply not true. Fighting for communication with conventions at the county level and getting placement was a nightmare. There are so many great people that volunteer, but there are also people that use their position directly to support their preferred candidates. When you run into those people, it becomes shocking how within the realm of their control, they have all the control. On the whole, I think they could have been much more oppressive, and to their credit, while the leadership decided I would not be the person, they let me show up and get my message out. I learned so much from this experience, from federal organizations and how they want to interact with candidates, the process from the local level, interacting with the delegates. With just a little more support, I could do dramatically better and have a much better showing next time. The persistent point I heard after interacting with delegates was this: Colton, I love what you're saying, and you seem really great and know your stuff more than I could have expected, but I have to vote for the person most likely to beat Blake. It got very frustrating to hear over and over again prior to the convention, but once I saw that Blake giving a seat to the Democrats and losing the most blue area of delegates only cost him 7% of the delegate vote, I get it. The problem is that the entire thing, it doesn't matter now. I have no confidence that Carrie Ann will beat Blake. Firstly, because being anti-Blake isn't a successful primary strategy. There are also many other reasons. I think Blake's going to win the primary with at least 60% of the vote.
I think you're right. Like, I think the delegate race, for sure, the convention race, it was a referendum not on policy, not, like moderate, versus right wing. It wasn't a Tea Party thing. It was just like it was in 24, probably what it was like in 22. It was a anti-Blake referendum. And yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think people, didn't necessarily disagree with you, but they were looking at it like, who's talking about being anti-Blake? And that wasn't your strategy. So convention's over. It's going to be Blake. It's going to be Carrie Ann. You said you think that Carrie Ann's going to, you said you think Blake's going to win with at least 60%.
That's correct. I mean, worst case scenario, he gets about 51%. That's an equal loss from the delegate loss. That carries over onto his worst primary race. But it's not a three-way race this time. There's a lot of structural reasons why he's going to do better. He's got the president's endorsement. And if you've seen the mailers he's put out, his mailers are actually true with some of the things he's done. I mean, you do have the Trump accounts that he did push. And so he's actually running a campaign on, here's the things I've actually done. And to the uninformed voter, they're just going to see that and they're like, oh, that's true. And you can look it up and see that it's true. I mean, Carrie Ann just spent money putting out a billboard that said Blake's Moore name and didn't say her name. It said vote Carrie Ann. Like, she's spending money advertising for him. It's crazy. And I don't think it's a successful strategy for the primary.
I wanted to talk to you actually about probably the most pervasive topic that pretty much everybody's talking about, the massive hyperscale box elder data center that they want to build up in, I guess they're going to call it Happy Valley. It's gotten a lot of heat, gotten a lot of attention. The Box Elder County Commission, they voted unanimously in favor of advancing the project. So I think there's still some hurdles that the project might have to jump through. And I think it sounds like there might be some referendum that might be on the ballot in November. I'm not 100% sure on the progress of that, but can you give me, I mean, it's in the district that you ran to represent. So what do you think about the 40,000 acre data center that Kevin O'Leary wants to build?
Awesome. Thank you. This is a huge subject right now, very timely. And I am in awe at our state's ability to get things done, regardless of the obstacles and people against it. With how this data center project is moving forward, it should be very clear that every problem in our state that is not solved is on purpose, because they can just do things. This project is a great example of, if we can get our guys into positions of power, everything becomes possible in our state. We can change everything. Personally, I actually love the mission and goal of MIDA. There are so many ways that improving our military projects in the state creates whole ecosystems of improvement to the community. It should be a base requirement that everyone on that board is a veteran, though, with at least 3 of the 7 seats being for prior enlisted. The issue of mission creep to supporting developments that really don't have a lot to do with the military, like those massive hotel complex, and just very thin tie to military purposes. I mean, oh, they'll give discounts to military members. Like this, that's garbage. It's a direct reflection of the board's own lack of military service. They are representing their own life service, which is developers. And so these public-private partnerships are a huge red flag, and when applied to AI, expose a major fault in the program. With the AI system being private, it doesn't have to respect the needs for warrants or really any civil liberty protections. The military then buys the data and uses it for whatever it wants. Police ostensibly would also have access to the same data for a price, and it will be a revenue line item that I expect to see touted as support for why it's such a financial good choice. There are justifiable needs for AI improvement and even large data centers, potentially at this scale, in regards to national security. However, the nature of the partnership should be much more military-owned and civilian contractor supported, rather than military-funded private enterprises. Like many of our problems, it isn't even the idea that is inherently wrong. It's the incentive structure built around it. So when the public attacks the idea, they run up against insider knowledge that they're wrong. And so insiders couldn't care about their opinion. Whereas if the opposition had a better angle of attack, it could be wildly more successful. The nature of the deals being made are also so bad that it is embarrassing. First off, if someone says to make me an offer I can't refuse or I'll go to the next date, let them walk. They won't be respecting you, and the entire negotiating process will be from such a point of weakness that you are going to get burned. Just look at how the terms are structured. All the Stratos requirements are mere promises. All the state's concessions are immediate deliverables. There is no enforcement mechanism to ensure that the promises are kept. The land required for this project is more than a city, yet we're told by the end of it, it will employ only about 2,000 people. AI installations require less staff over time as they mature through their phases. We've seen this occur even recently in our state's existing centers. Even with their best estimates, it does not look like a good use of our land in terms of employing people. Obviously, you can compare it to how many people the land is currently employing and how many resources would be needed for a different model of development, but you've got to factor in the many, many billions of dollars that are going to go towards this. I don't think it is a good deal that was struck, and we should have passed on it. I don't think that the project is this demon idea that is bad in every respect. It's like being served a huge salad, but it's loaded with cat shit. Sure, you can pick it off and deal with it, but you are still a shit-eating pleb for accepting that dish. Send it back, demand a quality, untainted steak instead. What does a better deal look like? Not just solving their own resource supply issues, but solving everyone else's too. Build my water pipeline. With included power production, and a lot of people's concerns would just go away. If locals suddenly could water however much they wanted, and literally have their normal power use become free, it would be telling an entirely different story. Those infrastructure developments would be coming on the front end so we can see that they're serious out the gate, and it is much more mutually and directly beneficial instead of esoteric gains for the county to then find ways to redistribute.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point that you made when you said that if and when we choose that we want to do something, we can. I think that was one of my first things that I noticed with this is, yeah, you're right. Like when the state decides that they want to get a project done at lightning speed through META, through eminent domain, however they want to do it, they can do it very efficiently. Which it's even more glaring when we have homelessness in Salt Lake City and when we have drying reservoirs and supposedly we have the Salt Lake is drying up and the projects that we choose to prioritize at lightning speed are projects that don't seem to be in my opinion and some people's opinion properly plotted out. It was Salt Lake City that stepped up and stopped the ice facility from being built. You saw that they were trying to build a massive ice facility somewhere in, I think, West Valley was where the property was going to be, and either Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City put a stop to it, at least for the time being. I don't know if you saw that, but so they can do that when they want to. They can force a data center through, but they can't force an ice facility to do mass deportations. But I wanted to ask you, beyond your experience in the National Guard, beyond the data center, obviously we've already talked about those two things. What's your biggest niche issue? Obviously if you're running for Congress, there's probably more than one or two things that you're like to think about. What are your maybe one or two niche issues that you care about?
Yeah, it completely depends on what counts as niche, but my most important issue is obviously immigration, and I think that leads to solving everything else once we fix it. But I pushed a lot on water and solutions for the next 250 years rather than just getting us by. My ancestors were involved with digging a canal system to bring water all the way from the Rocky Mountains across the southern prairie land, enabling improved farming for Western Canada. And I'm talking about a massive distance dug with hand tools. To me, the desalination plant off the Pacific is an issue of the will, not of the technological or financial constraints. People would rather have their taxes go to babysitting welfare queens and fraud than actually secure a future for our posterity. I water is a big issue. It's just not a catastrophic issue for this generation. And so I think a lot of people are happy to kick the can down the road rather than actually solve the problem forever. There is a financial reckoning coming to our country and economic system, in my opinion. And if we're going to survive it, I think we need as much quality infrastructure, manufacturing, and food production as close to home as is possible in order to weather the coming storm.
Kind of on this topic, water and what we were just talking about with data centers, I put out, I mean, Twitter's not everything, but I put out a tweet, maybe a month or so ago. It was like a poll asking people, would you rather have the data center only? Would you rather have a water pipeline, like a desalination plant from the Pacific? I know people say, we can never do anything like that. Like, all right, we can do big infrastructure projects, but would you rather have the data center only, a water pipe only, or build them both? Water pipeline, it was tied, water pipeline and build them both. I think people are, they're open and willing to these big infrastructure projects, especially if they're framed in a way. Like if you listen to Kevin O'Leary on Tucker, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that, but like within the first 5-10 minutes of the interview, and when Kevin O'Leary was talking, it's like, oh, like I understand how if you haven't read up on this on your own, and if you haven't read into the Ruby pipeline on your own, or if you haven't done any of your own research into any of this, and you're just hearing what he's promising about jobs, or what he's promising about economic opportunity, that if you don't know anything else, that you would be susceptible to not falling for it, but just supporting the data centers. But I also think that people are, part of why they are supportive of it is they think that it's going to bring benefits to their communities. Well, what else can we do to bring benefits to our communities? We're able to move the Ruby pipeline for a giant data center that can provide enough power for millions of homes. Like if it's going to provide up to 9 gigawatts of power for a data center, that's twice the amount of power that the entire state of Utah consumes. Like why couldn't we have done this years ago to bring down power rates? But whatever. I just want to hear, I guess, so you're not running independent or write-in in November. No, you're going to be out of it. I want to hear what you think is going to happen in 2026, both here in Utah and nationally, what's going to happen in the midterms. And then looking ahead, 2028, we've got the Utah governor's race, we've got the Senate race in Utah, and then we've got, obviously, the presidential election. I want to hear what you think. And I guess, too, we had an election yesterday with Thomas Massey, if you want to talk about your thoughts on that as well. But I'll give you the floor. What do you want to predict with 2026?
Yeah, the elections that just recently occurred with Massey, that is a big one. And a large part of it is, I started this whole process really by loving Ron Paul and his being a Dr. No. And that's what a lot of people like Massey for, is him just voting no on things that he thinks are not great. The problem is that we have entered what Spangler would call the age of heroes. And there is an entirely different nature to what we're trying to accomplish in moving the needle forward in changing the world. And if we want freedom, it's not just casting one vote for a bill that says most freedom on it. There are structural changes that have to occur in almost like solving a calculus formula. It requires step by step in order to come to the proper conclusion. If you simply do order of operations differently, it's not going to work. And so Massey would oftentimes be voting against the president in terms of even something simple like I saw when he voted for ICE to take their masks off. And I just, seeing the ICE agents that already got doxxed and knowing how much they were struggling, I just couldn't agree with it. And it seemed like time and time again, he could be counted on ahead of time to know that he's going to vote for just something that's going to screw us over on trying to accomplish our larger goals. And so while in a lot of ways, I actually like Massey, I think he's got a lot of cool things and he did a lot of good things, but I think his inability to see the larger goal at play and the pieces that are being moved on the board is what made him need to get primaried out. And yeah, there's a lot to that there, but it's unfortunate, and I hope we live in a world 10 years from now that someone like Massey can come in and vote directly on pro-freedom issues, and that the world and the country can sustain that and be able to move forward with that. In terms of more locally, for the midterms, I think Phil Lyman is going to lose his congressional seat in a very tight race, 51 to 49. And then the federal lawsuits for our voting records are going to come through because, I mean, it's like 208 days since the federal request to get access to our records. I think that those offices are either going to get basically raided the way that we had to for Georgia or something, and we're going to take the voter rolls and they're going to get screened, and it's going to flip back to 60-40 in Phil's favor. I think there's some serious things going on in our state, and why they are fighting against those federal lawsuits to get access to the records, to clean them, and there's a reason for that. I think Mike Kennedy is going to win his seat easily thanks to the party's human sacrifice of Burgess. I really, it's hard to describe what seeing those speeches were. Burgess's farewell speech and Mike ahead of time thanking him for his, I mean, he literally called it a sacrifice for not running and splitting the vote in those kind of legacy districts. And it was just something else to see that people are making deals. And I think that Burgess got the short end of the stick on that. I think a Democrat's going to win District 1. I think that's a pretty easy thing to say, but I think it's going to be the Democrat that signals the most moderate out of the entire range. But when they get to office, they are going to turn into a complete psycho. It's going to be just as bad as AOC, as bad as Virginia governor. It's going to flip and to be just not representative of the state of Utah. We didn't really talk about the intel operation that I kind of piqued my interest on the Republican side of the race. There's some very weird things going on with that candidate. I think it's very astroturfed, and there's a lot going on there. But I don't have a lot of bandwidth right now with everything else that's going on to really do a deep dive on his background beyond his agency contacts and those relationships to really know how I feel about it ultimately. But there's something that people should be looking at there that's worth identifying. I think for District 2, Blake's going to win. Best case, he falls an even percentage from his convention reduction onto his lowest primary reduction, lowest primary win, which still gets him 51% of the vote. And more likely, I don't think Carry-On's going to break 40%. We kind of talked about some of the structural reasons already. Number one, the anti-Blake vote isn't a successful primary strategy that we've kind of seen play out year over year over year. So I don't know why she's doubling and tripling down on that. But also, when she is spending money, it's still advertising for Blake. I mean, I've been getting mailers and text messages and contacts from Blake's team just as a general kind of household, and I haven't seen a single thing from Carrie-Ann. People tell me she's doing lots of meet and greets and grassroots efforts, but I'm as plugged in as someone can be, and why am I not on any list for her home, her former state or house district that she ran in? Why am I not getting in those invites and things? It just seems like it's not going to be enough. That's kind of my feeling on that. At the national level, I think the GOP is going to pick up a couple seats, which is great on its own. But I also think we've cleared a couple of roadblocks off our own bench and will be much more effective for the next 2 years. And so things like the SAVE Act are going to have a better chance. A lot of debanking of illegals, like there's some structural things that are happening that are going to happen after the midterms that I think are going to change the game for us. I really, really hope that we can trigger an early census. And if we can, then I think we've got a rosy picture for 2028 and then onward. But that would be kind of a really outside chance thing of happening. For 2028, I think the governor's race is both very interesting and extremely boring. There's going to be a lot of Republicans putting in their hats for the race because it's technically going to be an open seat. Governor Cox has said he's not going to run. And so because, I learned that incumbents at a primary level, the party just wants to go for the incumbent. And so people are discouraged from putting their hats in. So once the seat opens up as open, then it's just a free-for-all. So if the SAVE Act is passed and mail-in voting is reined in, whether that's from Congress, from the president, there's a lot of different avenues that could happen. And if the state level can segment who oversees elections, which they need to, then I don't think Deirdre will even run. If we don't solve all of those issues, I think she's probably going to win, because who counts the votes is who wins. It's just as simple as that. In the timeline where the GOP makes some elections improvements, I see Jason Chaffetz winning convention, with Mike Schultz being a close second after at least the second round. John Curtis will buy signatures and be on the ballot either way. And so I don't think he's going to be focusing on the delegates the same way as just the general race. And then I think Mike is going to spend a considerable sum in what's probably going to be the most expensive governor's race in Utah history. And I think he might be able to win it narrowly. That's going to bring some positives. Namely, the pressure is going to let off from global homo in our state. I think that's going to be a very good thing. But I don't think it's going to change one iota about the fact that the governor's office is being run like a financial institution. For local Utah races, I don't really have a great bead on what 2020 is going to look like. I think it's going to be very fluid in the downstream as things shape up on the national stage. What issues are becoming popular, who's becoming popular, who from the bench is going to try to run for the next level, things like that. For the presidential race, I think we're looking at a presidential ticket with both Rubio and Vance. I think it's defaulting to Vance as the main guy. I mean, he's the VP right now. But it is up for switching depending on each of their performance in their respective assignments. I don't know if you've kind of seen as an audience, but Rubio is definitely the foreign policy assignment class, and Vance is more low-key, but the domestic policy. So that fraud department he's hitting up, that's some of his goals, and more domestic issues staying out of the news is more their focus to help preserve the power for that ticket. But I think if Iran, Cuba, and at least one other territory is resolved at the international level, I think Rubio will get to lead the ticket, especially if it's Taiwan that gets locked up. The Taiwan resolution is going to be those factories of microprocessors are all going to come to the United States, and we will cede that territory to China after we've basically deindustrialized it and made it so it's not worth it anymore. It doesn't make sense for us to, I don't know if people that listening happen to know the island hopping campaign that the Marines have planned to fight for Taiwan or whatnot. It's just logistically, it's right off the shore of China, and I don't think it makes sense for us to spend a lot of lives to defend that territory. And so I think we're just going to take everything we're taking from Taiwan and then let China take it. And in exchange, they're going to give us something else very valuable. And I think if we can pull that off, along with the other list, Rubio will be the next president.
Do you buy the argument that 2027 is going to be the year that China invades Taiwan?
Not at all. I don't think they need to. And that's the biggest thing about it. They don't have to invade it. The nature of the deals that are going to come on, it's just going to be a deal solved by the president, where we will preemptively, I mean, I don't know if you've already seen some of the talk that these microprocessors have been doing about moving their factories here and expanding their facilities here. But I think just we are racing on a clock where China is increasing their anti-ship missile capacity to where, I mean, you've just seen it in the Strait of Hormuz. Like, we are going to be locked out of that island hopping campaign very soon. And so that's really what we're racing against. And I don't think 2027 is the timeline for it. I think 2030 is China's goal for reunification. And I think we can strip out from China that skill set and industrial production capacity for that specific technology before then. And so I don't think China's going to have to. I think we're just making a big deal behind the scenes that's going to resolve peacefully, hopefully.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Colton, I feel like we've had a good conversation. Any final thoughts? Any predictions? Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I love doing this race. I loved meeting everyone. I loved learning so much. And I think I preserved a lot of relationships where I don't think the party would actively fight me from running in another race, which was important to me because obviously I just put myself out there. I think we need a way deeper bench of solid people in order to run for these offices, and I hope to earn a spot soon. I think there's a large culture of my turn at in the party, and that's why people tell me, oh, you need to do 10 years at this level and then years here, because everyone in those existing roles feel like, oh, no, you can't run for state legislature because you haven't done the same 10 years at the city council that I've already done. And so there's a lot of pushback from that. I think it's a huge hurdle. The national appetite for the type of candidates and for what needs to be accomplished has moved so far past where Utah is, but the existing institutional strength is massive locally, being able to decide races. And that's why you see our state just looks like such an anomaly compared to the rest of the country. We're allegedly a very Republican state, but you'll see policies that happen, they just look like liberals from 10 years ago, 20 years at best. And so that's, I think, what's driving that a lot. It's the my turn mentality. And so we need to get past that somehow. I think voters are hyper focused on local issues, which really surprised me after telling them I'm going for a federal office, like what my limitations are. But I was shocked at how voters needed to be approached if it wasn't affecting their life, not just in the state or even in the district, but like them personally. Like just the general lack of ability to turn the apple in their mind is rampant across the population, and they needed to be approached specifically how it affects them personally. And I want us to be represented by a much higher quality of individual. I mean, I'm very well read on a lot of subjects and can talk about things that really surprised voters. People would come up to me just with their most niche personal issue and were consistently surprised that I would just talk about stuff. One guy randomly talked to me about asteroid mining, and we went and talked about for 30 minutes on it. And he's like, how do you know this? I'm like, oh, I just read a lot. So I think that the voters' reactions to these issues and me trying to talk about things individually, it did not inspire me on that being an effective campaign method. I'm gonna have to figure it out somehow, because I ran on actual tangible items, because I'm frustrated seeing candidates having on their website when they talk and give speeches, it's just the most general slop typescript for what they believe in. But now it makes a lot more sense why they do that. Ultimately, I think it's gotten Utah people elected that they deserve. I think if people aren't being willing to be more discerning and educated on the subjects and just the scope of what matters, it's going to be it's why they've gotten what they've gotten. One kind of pertinent example is I was at a meet and greet and I was talking about some education issues and a very creative idea I had on getting rid of violent kids out of schools. And this lady stood up and she was very upset. She was unreasonably upset, in my opinion, but she basically said schools in Utah do not have that problem. And I kind of went back and forth with her on that. If they are already compliant, then it doesn't matter. But she wasn't willing to appreciate that this vote, that I would need votes from all over the country, there are schools where kids get beaten up every day and get abused by people, and the school just keeps those kids there to the point where sending your kid is putting them in a very violent situation, and there's no remedy for it. And yet, my remedy would automatically fix the problem because the school would lose their funding if they didn't follow the procedures. And so she's not willing to say that, well, my individual school doesn't have that problem because maybe we suspend kids or we have nice kids. But she can't realize that Alabama doesn't have that solution, or all these other states, California doesn't have these solutions. And so I'm running for a federal office, and a lot of these ideas that I have, even if it doesn't affect you personally, you need to be able to have the theory of mind on how it can impact other people. I mean, people all the time, they think I'm not a very empathetic person because I'm so and I'm a hardliner on immigration. But in reality, I am one of the most empathetic people because I can create a theory of mind for these other people and other groups and come up with ways to solve their problems, even if it doesn't affect me personally.
Are you going to run for office again? Are you going to run for Congress? Are you going to run for state legislature? What do you said that you were trying to leave the door open and leave some bridges unburnt. Are you going to run for office again? What do you think?
Yeah, I think almost certainly I'm going to run for another office, but I really need to get plugged into some organizations that have the volunteers and a little bit of funding and just the lead time. I didn't really appreciate how much lead time was built behind Carrie Ann before she ever announced. It was basically November that she had everything locked up, and the party had assigned her as the person that's running. And so really just me targeting a seat right now will do a lot, but I don't think I'll run for Congress this next time unless something crazy happens, like Carrie Ann wins, and then there might be an opening for something like that. But yeah, I definitely am open to it again.
Where's your social handle if you want people to give you a follow?
Yeah, feel free to follow me on X. I think my handle is Colton Hatch UT, and I'm actually pretty regular posting things, commenting. Feel free to check it out. You get to see a lot of my opinions on niche issues, but just contemporary issues that go on, and I'd love to interact with you and talk to you more.
Great. Thanks, Colton.